So, this recent Thrive conference, one of the speakers, Greg Hawkins, who was the kind of the point person, the project leader for, I don't know if you guys remember the Reveal study that Willow Creek did. The first round of that was 10, 15, maybe 15 years ago. So it started out with like surveys, like 11,000 people, Willow Creek plus 5 or 6 other churches, and even that's pretty big, especially since they have they have lots of connections and they basically had top flight statistical team, business analysis people, consultants from the best business firms in the world, business consultation firms, MBA from Stanford University leading the team. So really a very, very rigorous, PhD, the guy who designed the survey was not just like, hey, let's think of some good questions, which, well, most people just don't appreciate how hard it is to design a survey that really, that gets the information you want, and there's 10 different ways to get the wrong information and to miss a question and to just think sloppily or just miss things. And so the survey designer is like a PhD professional survey designer. It's a really, really strong study, first round. And then after the first round of information, they just kept going. And after 10 years, it was like, instead of 11,000 people, 6 churches, it was 250,000 people, 1,000 churches. And as of last month, when Greg, who he was the speaker, he was the team leader for this whole thing, and they've continued working with it, and now it's 500,000 people. And I can't remember; it's on his recording because there's no book for last month, and so I didn't get to this. 2,000 churches, 50 countries. It's just mind-boggling. But it's 500,000 survey responses from literally it was 1,000 churches 7 years ago. So it's 2,000 or something. And it's not just North America now, it's 30 or 50 or 70 countries. Incredibly rigorous statistics, analysis. They have 3 independent consultants evaluating the data. So it's about as strong a sociological study as ever has been done in the history of civilization. Seriously, just as far as the power of it, the careful analysis of it, the size of the data pool, the statistical power of the bottom results, the carefulness of the thinking. It's just insanely powerful, strong data. And so I'm going to try to summarize for you in 15 minutes 3 books worth of material and Greg's presentation. But when he got done, I was just astonished at the implications for Immanuel. So they started out, and their thesis was all the activities at Willow, like participating in Sunday morning, participating in small groups, participating in volunteer activities, that the more you participate in the activities here, that should drive, that should produce, that should help facilitate spiritual growth. And we expect to see that the more spiritually mature people are, the more activity, more church activity involvement should correspond with more spiritual growth, with higher spiritual maturity. And if we get people to be involved in activities, the more activities they're involved in, that should correlate with them moving and growing spiritually. That's what they're expecting to find. And then the question was, that was the first, we all know that's true, but let's just demonstrate it. And then the question, of course, is, so of all the activities we do, which ones are producing the most value? So let's emphasize those. And if there's activities that aren't doing much good, let's drop them. So they did this huge, big study. And what they found, to their horror, was that. So the statistical people came back and they said, we've discovered 4 different groups. And within these groups, everything else, once you identify, here's the group of people who they're not sure about Jesus. I think that they believe in God, but they're not even sure about Jesus Christ. These are growing in Christ. So the beginners I think we really do believe in Jesus. That's important. We're learning about it. These are, Jesus is very important. We ask him for help. We our relationship with Jesus is an important part of our life. That's a daily aspect of our lives. Number 4 is Christ in our lives. That's important every single day. And you can call this, it used to be church activity. Now it's relationship with Jesus, or in all their research, in the 3 books about their research, they had 3 different things. One is relationship with Jesus, and the other one is they actually use this term, intimacy with Jesus. Anybody recognize any of this? So crazy, totally. I mean, these secular statistical PhD analyst people, grind this huge pile of data, and they come out with saying, well, the only thing that really correlated to anything was the degree of relationship or intimacy with Jesus. And that went like this. They said it was like the strongest, clearest, boldest, largest effect. Out of 20 years of doing this, this is one of the top 3 or 5. The strength of the correlation, not like the little bitty, the little line you can, if you squint, it's like, oh, I think that's a slope, but I can't even sure which way it tilts. The statistical team, they were like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. So, and on this side is spiritual growth, which they said, what would the Bible say about that? Love God and love your neighbor. That's like a big thing Jesus said. If you want to follow me, love God, love your neighbor. That's a good indicator of spiritual growth. So love God, love your neighbor is what they that was spiritual growth. And they had attitudes, self-reported stuff. Do you feel love for God, love your neighbor? Do you think you love God and your neighbor? Is that important to you to love God and your neighbor? And then behaviors like, do you actually give your money to ministry? Do you serve the poor? Do you share your faith? Things. But I'm guessing that when they specifically use the terms did not drive or associate with, they use real specific terms in there. Probably this team are not idiots, especially when they've been doing this for 15 years now, and they've got 500,000 data points, and they have a whole team of PhDs doing the statistics. So I have questions I would ask to clarify, but my guess is that they're not stupid. As far as the validity of the people who did this work and the way they've done it and how long they've done it and how they've kept getting the same result everywhere they go, everywhere they go. So kind of the summary there is, and both that the more relationship intimacy with Jesus you have, the more spiritual maturity you demonstrate. So if you just take people in the room who are the people who already fit this category, and they'll be the ones who are giving the most, serving the poor, sharing their faith. And if you do anything, if you find any way, or even just track them over time, as people move from here to there, all those things increase. So slice right today, who in the room fits here, they're going to be doing this. Who in the room fits here, they're going to be doing this. And if over time you move, if you go from here to here, you go from here to here. Which is just huge. When he was putting that on the board for the presentation, I was just like, so you're telling me one of the biggest, most powerful sociological, statistical analysis studies that's ever been done in history basically says that our goal, our target, our priority for the Immanuel approach is the most important thing in the church world that you can actually measure. So that's kind of wow, huh? Wow. So this huge, big, crazy, powerful, decades long now. How many studies have you ever seen that have 500,000 participants? That's insane. And it shows relationship intimacy with Jesus corresponds directly to spiritual growth. The more of this you get, the more you love God, love your neighbor, serve the poor, give your resources, and share your faith. So our target, our goal is this whole thing says we have the right target. The bullseye we have identified is exactly the bullseye we should be aiming for. So isn't that just totally cool? There's already, I think, a whole lot of big reasons to why we should do what we're doing, and I think ways to, Patty, the biblical basis for the Immanuel approach is overwhelming, I think would be the right word. It's exhausting. It'll wear you out just going through it. And what this says is the sociological research support is just as strong. It's just the biblical support is immense. The sociological support is immense. And if you just watch what happens in your office, clinical outcome is huge. But for churches and places where they're skeptical, they're suspicious, it's here's another thing you might want to consider, that this study that's been going on for 15 years now, it's one of the most powerful, thorough, huge, exhaustive, extensive studies that's ever been done, happens to show this, and this is exactly what we're trying to accomplish with what we do. That's just one more really nice resource, data point, tool, something. A manual's not a tool, but this data, this study is a tool.